discussion. There will be no voting on anything that is talked about or anything until we move to the city council meeting. So this meeting will be just strictly for discussion.
Yeah, I believe I need to open our,
Okay.
meeting as well.
Okay, start with the debt forgiveness.
Want me to go ahead?
Yeah.
All right, so I apologize a little bit up front to the packet I got out was a little late coming this afternoon, but I'm trying to get some of that information all together. In your packet, and I'm not sure if we've all had a chance to look and review it, but we've got the front page here, which I'll kind of go through and talk about some of the talking points that myself, the board, senior leadership, and our provider team are all have talked about and have agreement around this. One of the things in the packet, just to show you a little bit, this is about Springfield, Minnesota. They're a hospital that will be closing in March. They're about the size of the town of Appleton. Just some information for you to read and something to give you some things to ponder about in making your decision. And then also the record amount of hospital closures that have happened in the past 10 years. So those are some things, as well as letters from our providers. There's letters from all of them in there, minus Penny. She's on vacation, and she does want the council to know that she agrees with her provider partners and supports them and our team at Appleton Area Health and in agreement with some of the information that was in those letters. So one of the things that we wanted to kind of talk a little bit about in areas to consider when it comes to the payback is even we have 56 days cash on hand right now. Back in January 26 to January 2017, I know there's a lot of talk about previous administration and the poor management that was done, and I'm not disputing that, and there were things that could have been done differently, but there was something that happened that had nobody could have predicted or done anything about it, or no board, no administrator, nobody could have predicted it. They had 12 deaths in 1 year, which was an estimated loss of $700,000, which comes out to 20 days cash on hand. When you ride on the low days cash on hand, and we've looked back historically, the only time it went really above 30 days cash on hand in the last 10 years is when there was something called meaningful use dollars that the government was giving, so people would upgrade their IT systems. But operating cash, it never really got past that. So most facilities that are 120 to 200 and plus days cash on hand, if they have difficult things happen like that, where you have 12 deaths in a cure center and a loss of $700,000 in 1 year, they can hit that dip and they can manage that, and nobody ever knows about it because they have enough cash on hand so that they can ride those hard times out till they get themselves brought back up, or make adjustments in their expenditures so they can kind of offset that. So those are some things that happened back then that hit Appleton hard, and that did, it just dropped it down and started that whole trickle effect of going downhill. And looking back 10 years, Appleton has been at the brink of closure twice. I think that this is something that you almost have to look at some historical data to look at future. If we think and choose that 30 days cash on hand or 40 or 50 is enough, and that's fine, that's stable, we're mistaken. And this type of thing potentially has the ability to happen to us again. Something like a provider leaving or something happening again, like in a cure center, that type of thing, it could set that all in motion. And that's why healthcare facilities make sure they have 122. What we've checked around the area, all of the healthcare facilities we checked with are anywhere from 120 to 417 days cash on hand. We're less than half of the lowest days cash on hand from the healthcare facilities around us. So
What is a day cash on hand, Lori? Is it 35,000?
36.
36,000.
36 for us, depending.
Okay.
The other thing is that our auditors recommend 200 to 275 days cash on hand for sustainability and stability. We are at 28% of 200 days cash on hand, so we're not anywhere near that number. It puts us at risk, and like I say, there are things that can happen stayed here and stuck it out that must have had a lot of grit and determination to try to stick this situation out. And then on top of it, you had new people that came in that decided to believe in it and believe that it could get turned around and very positive things could come of it. And that's not gonna happen every time. I mean, if we go through another scenario like that, that scenario isn't always gonna come together. It was kind of a perfect scenario where you had people that were gonna hang tough and people that were determined to make a difference and to come in and to really make change. And in all honesty, we were extremely lucky to recruit the providers we did under those circumstances. It's really difficult to do that when people are so uncertain about facilities. So I think that we have to be careful that we don't ever go there again in that scenario where we're that close to closing. I just think it's not something you can keep recovering from over and over again. So that's my feeling on that. Some of the other risks that we have, insurance payers, they're making us get prior authorization for just about everything. And there are more denials for care, denials for payment. They could probably go on for hours about what that looks like for us in healthcare. It's a different animal than any other business. We have a very high Medicare and Medicaid population, and what that means is we get paid approximately 53% of what we charge. If we charge $100, we get $53. So there's all these different challenges that get in our way, and if we ride that low amount of cash, we continue to put ourselves at risk because we just have some of these barriers that are in our way, as well as other healthcare facilities too. Reimbursement is decreasing from all payers. They have the ability to, they don't have to barter with us for what they're gonna pay us anymore. They can just tell us. That's kind of the way healthcare has gone. And then also our capital needs. We have a capital list of $816,000. We've purchased $254,000 of those things so far. We work hard to write grants. We do everything we can to get money in other ways, but there's only so much money to be had. Under our future needs, again, we need to build cash. I mean, I think that's critical to build cash for our sustainability, but also to look at future projects as well. I mean, if you're standing still, you're moving back in the world we live in. Technology changes so quickly, and there's just things that you have to do to keep yourself a very current healthcare environment. We need an OR update. I know you've seen that letter from Dr. Wacom on there. He is saying it loud and clear that he is very committed. We've talked. Has no intention of not continuing to come to Appleton. He said he's got a 10-year-old son and he's going to keep coming for a long time, but he expects that we will do something to accommodate that small OR at some point here in the near future. The care center, the west wing was built in 1964, the north and south in 76. I mean, the west wing in particular is constantly things happening there as far as breakdowns, and also just the environment. People are, I know Mitch has talked about, he had a resident who told him that her family would like her to go to another community because they have a new nursing home, but she wants to stay here. But I mean, that is the truth of it. Every community around us within 30 miles has updated or brand new care centers. The other thing that we think about is we've had a lot of traction with mental health. We're starting to be seen as a leader in mental health in the area, to the point where, and I'll talk about it a little later, but Senator Tina Smith's office has called us and wants to come out. They're sending somebody else to come out and talk to us and feel like some of the initiatives we have match with theirs. So we're really starting to set ourselves apart in that area. And if we do open up an empath unit downstream, we're going to need more space for something like that as well.
accommodate that extra influx of people, inmates. So again, vitally important that we keep the hospital not only in town, but progressing and up to date to meet codes and improved advanced standards that are expected both from state and federal levels. And just in addition on what Lori was talking about, the care facility, that expectations of the generation that's moving into a care facility these days is a lot different than it was 40 years ago. A lot of those people 40 years ago, 50 years ago, when they moved into a care facility, they probably grew up in a home where they had to carry water from outside the home, and they had an outhouse and what have you. Those are things of the past. They're expecting not only more accommodations, but nicer facilities to move into with a lot more amenities than what our parents their parents had before them. So there too, if we're going to maintain a facility like that, we have to update it and keep it current with the expectations of the public that's going to be using it. I guess keep that, or I ask you to keep that in mind as far as repayment dollars are concerned. I understand it's a loan, and I was brought up in school too, that if we borrow money, we're expected to pay it back. I always have, and I think, you all have been in that boat as well. But this is a little bit different situation in my view, because I think that the hospital can be a very shining star looking forward to the city of Appleton. And I think that any financial assistance, be it debt forgiveness or reduced amounts, stretching payback over a longer term, anything that we can do to help build our security at the hospital, I think that would be greatly appreciated and a benefit for all the citizens, and not only in Appleton, but in the surrounding area. And I ask that you keep that in mind when you do your voting at your next meeting.
And I just wanted to mention, you did say too, right, that like the hospital that closed in Springfield was actually bought out by a larger hospital and they were managing it. I think that's very important that people know we need to keep our hospital in our community operated by us, because what happened to them is the Mayo Clinic took it over, and when it didn't seem feasible to them, they just pulled the plug. So I mean, the option of selling out to Avera or one of these other hospitals doesn't seem to be a good avenue to go by the track record of some of the stuff that's been happening, correct?
Yeah, in that case, I think that definitely played a role in it. The other pieces is typically, Mike, I'm guessing, honestly, if that's come up in your conversation about aligning the debt we have, is probably, they're not gonna probably look at us anyway right now, so.
But I mean, I'm just saying that's part of the problem with these people moving into these other bigger hospitals too, that they can be just removed that.
Absolutely. If it's any system that takes over somebody, if you're not making money for them, you're disposable. I mean, I say that, most systems help make places money too, but if it's not making money, they're not gonna keep throwing money into something that's losing money. That's just never gonna happen. Because they have to, everybody's trying to be sustainable. So, I think one more thing that I wanna add, and because I think it's important too, is your provider team is extremely important to a healthcare facility, and we have an amazing team of providers, every single one of them. I think that their voice and how strong they feel about this and how strong they feel that we need to really support and think about those things, the sustainability and
long do you think it'll take you for 75 days of cash on hand?
Jake, you wanna weigh in on that?
Depends, that's a tough question. It could be at the end of this year, it could be at the end of 3 years. I mean, there's unforeseen circumstances that can happen. So it kinda depends. I mean, I'd love to say, our goal for the end of this year is 60, this fiscal year in September. And how we've grown, if we continue to grow how we have. We'd get there sooner, obviously, but there's also unforeseen things you don't know. You could have 12 desks in the care center and there goes $700,000 again, so it's tough to put in exactly.
I think if we look back the last 2 years, we went from one or 0 days. We had to pay back, what, about 1.4 between our past due bills and our, payback to Medicare?
Our past due bills were 1, and then 1 million, and then Medicare for last year was 600.
So within that 2 years was 1.6 million that we were paying back money, and we built up to, where we at the end of this last fiscal year,
Cash.
days, yeah.
Employee benefit cash or whatever.
So, the past 2 years wouldn't have anything to do with that. I would think that in a year, we would be there, barring anything that goes on.
And 400 days of cash on hand?
400,
100 days.
say another year later. If it's
So,
status quo.
4
like I said,
years.
There's a lot of room for error, so we're not here, but different circumstances that can happen.
Yeah, cause what you paid back would be about 38 days on hand is what you paid back from past due and,
Oh,
what you,
yeah.
yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
So you'd be at about close to 100 days if you wouldn't have to pay all that back too.
Thank you.
Anybody else got any questions?
I don't have a question, I think it's important to keep in mind that nobody in this room ever wants the hospital to fail. We all want it to grow, we all want it to have a new OR and a new nursing home and compete with the Mayo Clinic. Great. We have needs, that's very obvious. Nobody would disagree with you on that, right? We've also have big needs elsewhere that you guys have, some of you have sat in on. We have a water treatment plant from the 50s. We have a wastewater treatment plant that needs $1 million in upgrades. We have a street sewer water line project that's, I don't remember that number, I was so big,
$26 million.
I blocked it out. And so, I feel like, I understand where you guys are coming from, but you're coming from the hospital perspective and the hospital perspective only. Our job is to say, we have a water treatment plant that is in horrible shape, that needs to be done immediately. That's $5 million. So, to think that, to me, when you guys have struggled, everyone here wants you to succeed. The city is there to help it limp through. That's where this debt came from. I think if you fail, or not fail, if you struggle again, the city will be here to try and help you through.
But why would we even wanna take that risk of doing that again? I really believe that another time of that kind of a crisis will be a miracle if that hospital doesn't close.
I agree, I hope it doesn't happen again, but to ask, I don't know, $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 a month is not going to put you back in that situation. And it will provide us some money to start getting some money towards these other really big projects. So, I just struggle with the idea, first off, of $5,000 a month. Jake, what's your approximate payroll every 2 weeks?
160,000.
So you got,
That's just, 160 plus another 32,000 in para, plus another $60,000 in taxes.
so 225, 550,000 a month. And to me, 5,000 when we're looking at 850 for a debt is just not, that's like, I don't know, less than 1% or something. So I think that number needs to be 10 or 20. And I don't think we're in the position to do a 1-to-1 match. want to help the hospital. I don't think we can afford to give you guys $440,000 or whatever half is, $425,000 right now. We've got $26 million worth of projects we're looking at. So I don't think that's feasible for us, in my opinion.
But if there's $26 million in projects that are out there, this money, that's not, what percentages even of all those projects?
From the position of Public Facilities Authority, yes, it is. Because it would show that our position in terms of when we have money that we've given out, that we're getting it back, and that we're getting it back in a manner that we have covenanted to them that we would get it back. So we have commitments with state agencies for bonds that we have gotten in the past for the wastewater treatment facility. And of those projects, we have committed ourselves to paying back and to maintaining funds within those accounts to a certain level. And not doing so puts us in jeopardy to get future bonding.
Not sure that I'm following your point. I mean, granted, we want to establish a payback, but I'm not sure where you're.
The money that's in that sewer plant account was delegated to that sewer plant. So when the state looks at our financials and they see that we took the money that was allocated for that sewer plant and shuffled it to the hospital, we have a lot less chance of getting money from the state of Minnesota because we took monies that was delegated to that and transferred them somewhere else.
But
I mean, if we'd
how
had
is
it
that
out of our
gonna
gen-
change because it was already done?
Because if we replenish where we took the money from, or we get ourselves into a position where we are committed to replenishing that money, then we would have shown them a good faith effort to follow and be compliant with the mandates of that covenant that we made with them.
Which I understand, I follow the fact that you want to get that paid back or replenished. I understand, and I think everybody agrees that, the
Well,
city
if
as
it
a
would have
whole
came
has
from a
lot-
different account than that, if it had been general fund or a savings account, it wouldn't affect us, but it's affecting us on the other end to get money back.
Because it was a designated fund.
Yep.
Question on that. So when we reconciled our debt, it was $730,000 to that fund. Another about 150 to the city accounts, and then another 96 that was our AC unit to the city accounts, so that's kind of separate. We paid 120 for that ECPN, kind of compliance issue we had. Where did that 120 go? Did that go towards the fund, or does that?
That went towards the wastewater treatment fund.
Cause that, for the one-to-one match, that's the concern with the one-to-one match. It's the money that's in that account then, that's not getting paid back, cause there is city money that we were given that wouldn't have been a part of the bond, issues that you were saying.
Those were monies that were definitely taken out of that source. And we have since that portion of it returned it to their, which should not really have been touched.
But you're talking about where we wrote them a check and they wrote a check right back.
Yeah.
So it was like, in essence, returned the same day to the same account. So
Exactly.
I don't think that one's a.
Oh, I thought I heard it to the water.
So when it goes back to the city has more than one account, right? The aggregate number won't change, but the public finance source, the account, whether it's restricted or not, does change. It doesn't change the overall figure, but where it goes and how you use it does change.
So that 120 did? go
It
against-
did.
Did go against the water fund,
Yes.
so that decreased that.
Well, I was just gonna add to what Lori had said earlier, and I through all of this, been able to see all sides, and it's difficult because I was one of the people that were there when things went down and left, when things got bad, and went back, when things were better. And there were other reasons than just going back because it was better. But I can honestly say that, just to reiterate what the hospital is saying, that I've been working on the meaningful use that Lori was talking about, and this payback is ridiculous. It isn't payback, it's loss. It's banking that ER patient or that inpatient, imagining that you've got this patient coming in and saying, you're gonna charge them $100, like Lori said. And then if you don't meet all this criteria that the government lays out, which is tricky, and basically banked on your medical record, not on the people, on the medical record, you can lose even more of what little you get back per patient. So it's really not even about the facility, essentially. It's about how you work your numbers and how you can make it work. They're almost in a bind when it comes to the insurance part of it, with getting prior authorizations and getting monies back from Medicare and Medicaid, because it isn't a bonus that you're getting. It's just trying to make that limited amount, and they can very easily take it. So when I hear both sides talking, I hear that, yes, we have all these projects, and yes, we need another police officer or whatever it is. And we all have these things that we think are the most important. This is the one thing that is currently running this strong, and we don't want it to not run this strong tomorrow or in a year. So I look at a one-to-one match, and I see it differently than a numbers person. I'm looking at it as I don't want to get snaked in the end, just because we're trying to make ends meet on those numbers, and then putting them in a crisis because they don't have the chance to meet those requirements that are out there, and the prior authorizations that are out there. I've been involved in that too, and that's getting strict in 2020 into 2021, even more strict. You can't do any sort of radiology or x-ray above a standard x-ray without talking to the insurance company. So if somebody comes into the clinic, and it's been that way for a while, but if somebody comes into the clinic and they need a CT scan, that person sits and waits until that insurance company says it's a go, and it may not, because they may not meet the qualifications of that insurance company. Where before we'd get the money, do the exam, get the money for it. Now, if you're in a rush and you're trying to get it done because this patient's in pain, you could do the test and not get the payback. I mean, it's a gamble, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I see it from the hospital perspective of being concerned about having a very large payback, and getting themselves in a position where if they're not making, that $53 on that patient, they're instead making $33. It's going to change. It's going to change how they're sitting.
I just don't feel that asking them to pay $10,000 or $20,000 a month on a $500,000 monthly payroll, or whatever the figure is going to put them in a position where they're that tight all of a sudden. I mean, that seems very reasonable to me. The banker in me says they've had this money for 2 or 3 years interest-free. That's pretty reasonable too. And they've got close to $2 million in the bank. If they wanted to, they could write a check for the whole thing. So to ask for, pick the number, 10, 20, seems really fair to me. I don't think that puts them in a tough spot.
So Andrew, can I just add to that? So when you see that we're at 56 days cash on hand, and there's not a healthcare facility around anywhere near that low number, doesn't that worry you as somebody that wants to keep this hospital and care center and clinic in this community?
Absolutely, but is 10,000 or 20,000 or whatever the number is going to greatly affect that 56 days cash on hand a month?
Yeah, it can affect that potentially, and it's going to also affect what we can purchase ourselves. I mean, you talk 120,000, that's a CR. Fortunately, we had some gifted dollars. There's things that we desperately need. And yes, 120,000 is a big deal to us.
No, 10 or 20,000.
Over the course
A
of
month.
the year.
20,000 a month is about
240.
Yep, it's about 6.85 days cash on hand per year. We're not growing. I see that as significant when we're at 56 right
Okay, how
What's
about,
10,000?
how about 10?
How many days cash on hand is that?
123, 3 days cash on hand?
That's easier to live with than 20, but going back to the one-to-one match, that was brought to us 2 or 3 months ago. You said that in your.
Yep, I said I'd like a suggestion from what you guys would like, a 1-to-1, 2-to-1, 10-to-1, how much you wanna pay a month, yep. And that was your suggestion you brought to us, so that's good. I don't think 5 a month it'll just take a long, long time, even with debt forgiveness, if you paid half back. It would take a very long time. And we have other big projects brewing at the same time.
Which I will say, I was here when all those discussions were had. And I was never in favor of any forgiveness or matching of any sort. The understanding was that it was a loan, it was interest-free, and it was gonna be paid back. So, this is a very tough situation on both sides, and it's gonna be hard to make a decision because it will affect either one side or the other, And I feel the same. I mean, I've talked to Warren before too, and I don't feel like I'm that old, but I was raised the same way. If you took out a loan, you paid it. And most of the time you did pay it with interest. And I realize that a lot of members of teams have changed and such, and that makes the change more difficult because this is not what some of these people chose. It's not what some of you people chose, but here we are, and now we're trying to figure out a solution to appease both entities. So,
I think for me, I just can't help but keep going back to the, for whatever reason, there's this perception that 30 days or 50 days is just, that's really great, it's a whole bunch of money, it's $2 million. It's not. It makes us very unstable. We are not a stable healthcare facility if you're comparing us to critical access and rural health clinic and care centers like us for what the amount of cash we have to buffer when something critical can happen. We don't. And I mean, I think until there's that, there should be some urgency. I mean, we feel, we gotta get our cash up, because we don't wanna hit that difficult scenario that comes along, and then we're either coming here and asking the council to give us some money, and that well only runs so deep, clearly. I mean, we're discussing money right now, so, and I truly do not believe that it will survive 3 significant, just about closing events in this amount of years that it is. And I just implore you to think about the days cash on hand and how important that is.
Are you anticipating a significant closing event? Because you've mentioned 3.
No, but in January 26th of 2017, they had 12 deaths, $700,000. With 56 days on cash on hand, you bet we would be in trouble. Absolutely, we'd be in trouble if something like that happened again. And nobody had anything they could have done to prevent or change that. It was just an event that happened.
So how do you, Jake, this question is more for you. How do you internalize these occurrences when hospitals are in the business that death happens? Just like, you're in a bank, you're gonna have defaults, you have to deal with negative securities, and you have to take measures to anticipate that. What do you do?
Can I just say something quickly to the answer? This event that happened is unusual to have that many in 1 year like that. But it doesn't mean that it can't happen again. And I'm not talking about that specific event, that's gonna happen again, but there's other events that could happen. Some,
Bajwa even or something like that would be enough to set it too.
Just anything that would, yeah.
But I just think if we do put something in there, I mean, my opinion is to say we pick 10,000 a month, and if you guys see something coming on, let us know, and it can, you know what I mean? It's not something that has to stay there. Or, I mean, it's not like we're not gonna keep helping you. I mean, that's what I'm trying to get across. We have to keep the hospital open, but we have to keep you a town around the hospital to keep the hospital.
Our goal is not to come to the city for
Yeah,
financial.
yeah, no, I understand
Our goal
that.
is to avoid having to come to the
Yep.
city for financial, and we have been able to do that for the
So would you like to see, like, what would be your ideal outcome to say we wait another year till you're at 100 days cash on hand and then you would feel good, or what?
I mean, I don't think we're opposed to paying you some from right away. I mean, we, like with the 5,000, we were perfectly willing to start that. I mean, we wanna, do the right thing as well. But we also wanna build cash so that we can be sustainable.
Well, I'd like to forgive the whole thing, but unfortunately with the things that we got going on, I don't think we're in that sort of position to do that, you know. And with that, I don't even think we're in a position to do one-to-one right now. But I would like to start some payments going. I like $10,000 a month personally. Is that 3 days cash on hand for you guys? Start there. Let's see how we do with our grant writing and funding for these other projects. And if that starts going well, let's look at this 3-4 years down the road, maybe sooner, and see if we can do some debt forgiveness. That would be my feelings.
Two things, in case I forget the second thing. Is the match part, is that because of the fund compliance? That we don't wanna have a match? I know, Amber, you said earlier you were in favor of it from the beginning. But is that, because that's 80% of what we owe, minus the AC unit, because I think we have annual payments for that. 80% of what we would owe would be from the fund that we owe back. 20% would be from the city coffers. So, is that the part that you guys don't wanna match it, or is it the full amount? Does that mean could be 20% matched, or is there any room there?
Is that something that has to be decided tonight? I said, like,
We're
if
not
you're
even
willing
taking
to,
actions.
what did you say?
We're not even taking actions right now.
No, I know, but we will be having a meeting after this. I'm just saying,
It's
is
not on
that
the
something, does the match have to be discussed and decided on immediately? Or can we just start with some payments? I guess if, Jay, you said 10,000, but you are saying 5,000, I would be fine with 5,000. I just feel like we have to start somewhere and make some progress and perhaps have another meeting in a few months. Keep in touch. But I feel like we have to make some progress and some movement forward.
We've talked about that too, remember, and I think, speak for myself, but I think I can speak for the whole board, agree that we need to start making some payments back in good faith, that we borrowed the money in good faith, and we want to make payback on it. The conflicting problem that we have is that we're trying to maintain a good, stable environment at the hospital, and I'm sure you're understanding of that as well.
Mhm.
It's not that we're trying to dodge starting payback or a payment schedule back, it's just at what level, and to try to maintain as much stability and financial strength as we can to, just for, just for the future. I mean, the public appearance, the staff comfortability of working there,
What do you
getting
mean?
to the point where we are not stable again. It's
Staff comfortability and public appearance. What do you mean?
if the general public feels that the hospital is not a stable and a good working environment financially, it makes it harder to hire staff, makes it harder to hire providers. Again, bond issue, that if we're going forward, the city is gonna be the bearer of the bonds, or the one issuing bonds, but and I'm sure Jason, Andrew, anybody that's running a business realizes the significance and the importance of having a financially stable business when they go out and try to hire employees and upgrade equipment.
People could look at that also, your payback though, as stability.
Not only that, but I feel like Appleton Area Health has come so far in 2.5 years. I mean, you can't give enough applaud for what everything is done. And there was so much animosity and hard feelings. I mean, there is no secret that there was hard feelings. And, throughout the community, I think people are just so positive about everything that has happened and all the changes for the good. And so making some progress with some repayment, I think, is just another bonus, in good faith.
I also think, though,
there are members of the community who want to speak. Would you like to say something?
I'd like to say, the reason we're here today is because of mismanagement, lack of transparency. That's why we're here in the first place. I was here 10 years ago when the prison closed, and they had a manager that came in and said they lost $400,000 to $750,000 when the prison closed. He didn't realize what an effect that had. That was a management decision that should have been handled and never got you here. The other thing is, we got a community to run here. I'm paying taxes on this property in town, and it's crazy for what the property is. So this city council has to address the community, not just the hospital. I mean, we'd all like to have everything, but the city council has to be responsible for the sewer plant, the water plant, and you came to them, and they bailed you out with the money you got now. I don't see a problem with the city holding that money and keeping it. You came in once before, and you got taken care of, and the problem was you got to take care of then, you were already in the suit. Hopefully with the transparency and the monthly meetings coming and presenting to the city council, you'll stave off the problem before it gets here. But I don't see a problem with the city holding that money instead of the hospital holding all of it. And then the other question I have is, when you have 56 days of cash on hand, when you make capital expenditures, are you using that 56 days of cash on hand? And who's making those decisions? If you're gonna spend $200,000 up there, I want the city council involved in knowing that's happening. I don't want just the hospital board doing it, because it is owned by the city. Remember, who owns that hospital? It's not the hospital board, it's the taxpayers in this community.
So can I respond to that? So, I wasn't here when this went.
And I know that.
Yeah, so, what the hospital board does is they hire my position.
Right.
And ultimately, I'm responsible for, the hiring of everybody's positions, including your providers, and everybody there. You hire people because you want them to do a job and to do it well. If we're going to, every decision we make has to come before the city council, that's not gonna work. That's not what it's meant to be about. It's meant to be about you put people in a position to trust that they will do the job. Yes, there have been bad situations, but what is very frustrating to me, because myself, our leadership team, our providers, all of our staff, every one of them is working their butts off day in and day out, and it is very frustrating to live in the past over and over again about what happened. We are working hard, we're honest, we're doing our job, we're transparent, and it's frustrating when I hear that kind of
I
comment.
understand that, but these guys can't assume it's being run right. They have to know. That's where transparency comes in. They need accountability.
Well, then that's micromanagement, and you will lose people, good leadership.
I don't think when you start making major capital expenditures, it's micromanagement. I mean, if you keep spending capital improvements, how are you ever gonna get past 56 days? How are you gonna hit 100 days? You're gonna keep making all these capital improvements, but yet you're gonna get to 100 days? We gotta move on to our next topic, because we have to close here in 15 minutes, so I'm sure there'll be some discussion on that. It was the city that bailed you out to do it. Well, the hospital board also got us in that position. Okay, let's move on to Appleton area health ordinances.
So you don't have enough cash to sustain.
You had mismanagement.
No, correct, but
Okay,
mismanagement.
we gotta move on here now. Appleton area health ordinances.
Yeah, we had our, working session yesterday, and I think you brought back recommended changes from, our, what we would have recommended.
You have it in the last page, yellow.
So, on 31.67C, our opinion, our legal attorney's opinion as well was that to have Dan sign off on every single bill we pay would be very redundant and difficult for him and Jake, and just to be able to get our business done and do it in a timely manner. So what we were recommending, and you guys have the highlighted paper there, the chairman what is a normal process, and I know Dan had some of that information I gave yesterday, when the time comes where we start to talk about projects, there's processes that we would go through in the hospital, and I can give you guys all that same information, where we would do a needs assessment. You know, what are our needs in our community and our service area? What is our facility needs? Having somebody come in and doing a facility assessment. And what we want to do, the board and the management team, be able to do our due diligence so we can bring information that is helpful and worthwhile and good information so that the council can make a final decision on whether or not we would do a project. Rather than the way the language was written before, there would be an ability to, you know, maybe say, no, we don't want you to do your due diligence, we just want to leave this alone. We want to be able to do our due diligence and look at things when the time comes.
So Lori, do you have the suggested language?
That is a suggestion.
The yellow highlighted is your suggested language. Okay. Okay, that makes sense.
How would the language, as was recommended, prevent you from doing a needs assessment?
I am not a lawyer, so I don't know all of the legal way they read it, so I don't know. If
Danielle,
Danielle would have.
in your opinion, the language that I proposed, as it was, would it prevent them from being able to do their due diligence, to do a needs assessment? Because I don't recall putting in that language anything that tied your hands to the city council, preventing you from doing a needs assessment or any other assessment that you would need to do.
It would be a needs assessment up to the point where we would come and say, here's all this information, we would like to do a project. You guys, here it all is, you can decide if you want to vote yes or no, up to that point.
That language, and I'm not an attorney either, but that language does not prevent you from
Well,
doing that.
That was her professional opinion.
Well, I don't agree with it.
Hold on now, who's Danielle's
No,
professional opinion?
their attorney that they hired.
Okay.
So you're saying we are not capable of determining what our needs are for expansion or whatever the case may be, to bring it to you to make that decision. That's all we're asking.
No, that's not what you're asking. What you're asking, and with respect, I present this to you, is to change the language so that at the very end of your process, then you can involve the city council.
You're gonna make the final decision.
Doesn't matter, but in that interim, in that space, you get to determine contract negotiations, planning, stipulations that you want to be signed off on. Whereas the preference should be to involve the city council earlier, not for permission, just for information.
But you'd want the information from us as to what we want
In the beginning, yes,
in the beginning.
yeah. So why change it to this?
Danielle, when you
I
talked
think-
to our attorney, was there any, what was your discussion with maybe your legal counsel to the city?
Yes, so I forwarded her our proposed ordinance, and then I have not had any discussions with her. She didn't respond back.
So who wrote the yellow then, if that's not their attorney?
Our attorney.
Their attorney.
You just said they didn't respond back.
Correct, to me.
Oh.
And so he was asking if I had a discussion with her proposed
Okay,
changes.
I'm
No.
sorry.
No.
Okay.
So you'd have a problem with us doing all the work and then you approving it in the end.
Well, I mean,
that what you're
ideally,
saying?
you would bring, and stop using the word problems with what I would like. If I have a problem, I'll tell you.
You know, so will I.
So, just so that you know, there is no problem. It's a preference. And the preference should be the standard, which is to deal with the city that owns a hospital early on, not at the end, after you've made a whole body of decisions that could influence the contract.
How would we influence the contract? Give me that. That's-
You just said that you'd like to do a needs study, which, by the way, the original language doesn't prevent you from doing. You'd still be able to do that. But you'd like to do all of that first, and then bring that to the city for a decision. And the problem is that you should be dealing with the city early on, not at the end of your process.
Boy, now we're really getting minute. We're just bringing something.
If it's so
This is
minute,
what
then leave it
we
alone.
wanna
Don't change
do.
it.
And you can say, no, I don't care.
What does the city council think about that?
I think the 10,000 makes sense. That seems very reasonable. I don't want Dan signing every $20 check.
Do I?
don't fully understand this, but I believe Willie's concern comes from like if, I think you could do a needs assessment and then hire an engineer to like get you your plans and stuff and potentially spend, I don't know, a lot of money doing that, and then come to the city and we're going, we're not in the position to bond for that right now, whatever, so then that engineering money would be out the window? Is that?
Well, I'm gonna return back to your original point. The $10,000 is a big issue. Given what, I mean, even audience members have mentioned this from the past that has happened, the lack of separation of authorities is kind of how you got into the problem that you are into anyway. And to say that the mayor should only sign when there's an overages of expenditures that have not been planned for to $10,000 is ridiculous. You want your city involved in your financial decisioning of your hospital board early on. The mayor would be going to the meetings anyway. Why couldn't he be given the responsibility of signing off on the warrants? What's so bad about that?
Checks twice a week, sometimes every week.
And you guys don't have a session when you do the checks?
No.
How are you doing the checks out of session when you need your council chair to sign?
We're not doing them. What do you mean?
So you don't only sign them in session, right?
No.
Okay, and is it gonna be too much of an imposition for Dan to go and sign? The city is not that
If
big.
he wants to, but
You know, it's other cities, much larger than this, do it that way.
So they have, to me, that doesn't make time sense. If there's a $10 check for a new broom, Dan would have to sign it?
Well, I don't think that they buy individual brooms like that. I think they buy in, bulk for what they need.
But you know what I mean, a $50 check, it just doesn't seem like.
Listen to the
that-
chairman of the hospital nursing home board and the chief executive officer, or the chief financial officer of the hospital, provided that any payment from this fund for unbudgeted expenditures in an amount exceeding $10,000 shall require additional signature from the mayor. Listen, that's saying only when they have an overage that was not planned for. Overages that were not planned for were not the way that the hospital got into the situation that was in. It was not communicated with the city council when it came to decisions of signing off on things. That's the ultimate check and balance there. I don't see how that would, Dan, I guess this comes up to you. Do you feel that your value, your opportunity cost for going to sign these checks is gonna take you away from everything?
You know, so you gotta sign there, you must send checks out every day, or what do you do? I don't know.
not every day. Is the issue with the 10,000 threshold unbudgeted?
It's not the threshold.
It's the unbudgeted.
It's not the unbudgeted. The city mayor should be part of the decisional expenditure decisions of that board as well. There are people in our city that cannot afford bread, okay? And we have got to be responsible here. So my recommendations were based on what I experienced with some cities when I was doing that research. It is a choice. I would recommend against this choice as presented.
I have a real problem with no latitude for this board. For the past 2 years, and your checks that you're talking about, checks and balances, for the past 2 years, this council has asked these people to come in and talk to you concerning the financial situation, what we owe, what we don't owe, what we have days on hand, what the hospital's doing, what it's projecting to do. For 2 years, that was part of the agreement. You never had that before. And these people came in and gave you good information. They had paperwork for you. If you didn't have it, the mayor had it to give to you, because it came to our meetings. And the latitude, you can't give this latitude and the trust. And I believe in one of those cities that you looked at, trust was a very important factor. And we're asking for you to trust us to do this.
Well, you have two representatives on there. You have the CEO and the chair of the board. Why can't you have the mayor on there? Why not? What's the problem with that?
I think that what you're saying, Willie, is you've talked to all these towns and they do this. well, I've talked to CEOs from different towns too, and they aren't having people looking at every single check they're writing. They're not micromanaging to that level. And what it feels like to us, and I will tell this whole council, and you really need to hear this because I've never worked with a stronger leadership team than I am right now, or our providers, or our staff, and this board has been supportive and they've taken a beating over and over about things. But what I will tell you is you have to allow people to do their job, and you have to have some trust. I know there's been bad times and bad things that have happened, but we can't keep paying the price for what somebody else did. We are doing what we're supposed to be doing. We're working extremely hard for that facility. I don't know people that work hard. They work well past their hours or 40 hours, etc. But what you're doing by doing this is you're making us feel like we're not trusted. Like you don't trust the work we're doing. And what will happen when that kind of continual battering keeps happening and happening, because we've been feeling it for 3 months, you will lose good people. You will lose them. Because strong leaders, and I talked to Gene Wenstrom about this actually, strong leaders, they want to continue to grow, improve, and make something better and better and better and keep striving for that. And if you keep pulling that back and handcuffing that, you're going to lose them. And that's something you all need to consider when you're making your decisions, because we are feeling very pushed, very untrusted, distrusted. I looked at Jake's face the other day when we were talking about this whole thing with somebody else having to sign the checks. I looked at his face and I seen in his face somebody that looked like, what am I doing wrong? Why don't they trust me?
It isn't about
And-
trust. I
well,
told you when I was
Dan, it
voted in
sounds like
mayor,
trust.
I told you we were putting fail-safes in so this wouldn't happen. It has nothing to do with anything against you or anybody in that facility.
Well, it
And
feels
you
like
knew
it.
that when I walked in. I went to your office and I told you I was gonna start implementing this stuff so it can happen.
If you
So this
think-
should have never been a shock.
If you think CFOs from other healthcare facilities are having that type of oversight over what they're doing and paying bills, every single bill you wanna sign like a $50 bill, you will find, and I would challenge you all to call up these CEOs then and get information elsewhere, because it's not every healthcare facility is doing what you guys are proposing to do.
Well, we'll take it under advisement. Any other discussion?
You're destroying this. I don't think I cannot believe.
You're taking it to this level, we're not.
No, yes, you are. The
Okay.
day I walked into that room back here with Willie Morales, and he held that first draft message up to me, or that draft version you had of the ordinance, he says, this is gonna happen. What do you expect for me to think about that? And he told several of the members the same thing. This is gonna happen. And then I discussed with him on a personal basis concerning Lori having an emotional about the raise thing, whether it was right or wrong. And he says to me, then she needs to grow some tougher skin. Come on, Willie. Stop taking as much as you can, give up some of this stuff, and trust us to do the right thing here. You didn't get what you wanted on some of those things, now you need to give a couple little things. We're not asking for much.
I'm not getting anything. This is not Willie Morales. This is the city of Appleton.
No.
And the difference is, when you're saying that, and remember, you're in my office, you're bringing me information about your CEO, which is
You called me in.
wrong.
I didn't come in.
I called you in because the rest of your board members started to come in despite the trust issue. And I called you because Warren was the first one to come in. And when you mentioned that, yes, she would need to get a thicker skin. You know why? Because in our positions, we get attacked by everyone all the time.
The control issue lies at your table.
That's right.
It's a matter of whether Willie controls things or whether the council controls.
Are you guys comfortable with your yellow
Yes, very much.
and all the other ones that were, is good? These are your only two ones that you're,
That's it.
okay.
And the rest of the
In the most current version. that you have, yeah.
Okay.
Does anybody
motion? Make a motion to adjourn the special session.
I second.
Motion been made and seconded to adjourn the meeting, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed,